Charlie, you and Warren have been making concentrated investments since the 1950s. Many of these investments have led to gains, but even more impressively, none of them have led to significant losses. As far as I can tell, neither one of you has lost more than a few percentage points of equity on any single investment. Daily Journal has recently bet a large amount of its capital on AliBaba and foreign traded stock. It's also taken on an additional $40 million in margin debt to make these investments. What makes you so sure that these investments won't lead to a substantial impairment of Daily Journal's equity capital, which would impact the company's ability to reinvest the resources needed to develop the company's software operating business?
Well, of course, if you invest in marketable securities, you have the risk that they'll go down and you'll lose money instead of make it. But if you hold a depreciating currency, that's losing purchasing power. On balance, we prefer the risks we have to those we're avoiding, and we don't mind a tiny little bit of margin debt.
Charlie, Alibaba is a top 3 holding for you. It sells at a steep discount to its U.S. peers. Best comparable is Amazon, which is triple Alibaba's PE. So what discount should U.S. investors seek when buying Chinese stocks, considering the political, regulatory, and especially the ownership structure risk? Oh, and considering the fortune Berkshire made on your BYD suggestion, why doesn't Buffett buy Alibaba?
Warren, like many other intelligent people, likes to invest where he's personally comfortable. And for some reason, I'm more comfortable with the Chinese than he is. That's a minor difference. I have all kinds of places where I'm just like Warren. I have all kinds of things where I'm not comfortable, and I just don't go near them. I think an old guy is entitled to invest where he wants to invest in.
What makes you uncomfortable? What do you not?
It's okay to have some things that you just don't want to bother with.
My question concerns China. In 1860, GDP per capita in China was 600. In 1978, the year Deng Xiaoping took over, it was 300. Today, it hovers around 9,500. Never before in the history of mankind have we seen such a rapid eradication of poverty, pulling approximately 800 million people out of destitution. You are on record as a zealous fan of the Chinese work ethic and Confucian values system. As we can see from the deteriorating U.S. relationship with China, the Western world does not understand China. What can we do to increase knowledge, understanding, and appreciation of the Chinese civilization?
Well, it's natural for people to think their own civilization and their own nation is better than everybody else. But everybody can't be better than everybody else. You're right, China's economic record among the big nations is the best that ever existed in the history of the world. And that's very interesting. A lot of people assume that since England led the Industrial Revolution and had free speech early, that free speech is required to have a booming economy as prescribed by Adam Smith. But the Chinese have proved you don't need free speech to have a wonderful economy. They just copied Adam Smith and left out the free speech, and it worked fine for them. As a matter of fact, it's not clear to me that China would have done better if they'd copied every aspect of English civilization. I think they would have come out worse because their position was so dire and the poverty was so extreme. They needed very extreme methods, totalitarian methods, if you will, to get out of the fix they were in. So I think what China has done was probably right for China, and that we shouldn't be so pompous as to be telling the Chinese they ought to behave like us because we like ourselves and our system. It's entirely possible that our system is right for us and their system is right for them.
Mr. Munger is a champion of Chinese stocks. How concerned is he about Chinese government interference, as seen recently with Ant Financial, Alibaba, and Mr. Jack Ma? What, for example, is to stop the Chinese government from simply deciding one day to nationalize BYD?
Well, I consider that very unlikely. I think Jack Ma was very arrogant to be telling the Chinese government how dumb they were and how stupid their policies were and so forth. Considering their system, that is not what he should have been doing. No, I don't think that. I think the Chinese have behaved very, very shrewdly in managing their economy, and they've gotten better results than we have in managing our economy. I think that will probably continue. And sure, we all love the kind of civilization we have. I'm not saying I want to live in China. I prefer the United States. But I do admire what the Chinese have done. How can you not do it? Nobody else has ever taken a big country out of poverty so fast and so long. And what I see in China now just staggers me. There are factories in China that are just absolutely full of robots and are working beautifully. They're no longer using peasant girls to beat the brains out of our little shoe companies in America. They are joining the modern world very rapidly, and they're getting very skillful at operating.
China is uninvestable, in my opinion, at this point. I've never invested in China long or short. Why is that? I don't trust the data. I don't trust the relationship between the United States and China anymore. I think that investments in China could be confiscated. I think there's a risk of that, end quote. Obviously, with a significant percentage of the Daily Journal's marketable securities invested in BYD and AliBaba, you feel differently. Please explain why you are right.
Well, of course, only the future knows who's going to be right. But China is a big modern nation. It's got this huge population and this huge modernity that's come in the last 30 years. And we invested some money in China because we could get more value in terms of the strength of the enterprise and the price of the security than we could get in the United States. Other people, including Sequoia, the leading venture capital firm in the United States, have made the same decision we have. But I'm sympathetic to Gunlock. If he's nervous, he doesn't have to join us. Different folks have different opinions. I feel about Russia the way he feels about China. I don't invest in Russia, so I can't criticize Gunlock's point of view. It's just I reach a different conclusion.
Do you think value investing is still relevant in a GDP decreasing world? And what about passive investing?
Well, that is easy. Value investing, the way I regard it, will never go out of style, because value investing, the way I conceive it, is always wanting to get more value than you pay for when you buy a stock. And that approach will never go out of style. Some people think that value investing is you chase companies which have a lot of cash and earn a lousy business or something. But I don't define that as value investing. I think all good investing is value investing. It's just that some people look for values in strong companies and some look for values in weak companies. But every value investor tries to get more value than he pays for. What is interesting is that in wealth management, a lot of people think that if they have 100 stocks, they're investing more professionally than they are if they have 4 or 5. I regard this as insanity, absolute insanity. I find it much easier to find 4 or 5 investments where I have a pretty reasonable chance of being right that they're way above average. I think it's much easier to find 5 than it is to find 100. I think the people who argue for all this diversification, by the way, I call it de-worsification, and which I copied from somebody, and I'm way more comfortable owning 2 or 3 stocks which I think I know something about and where I think I have an advantage.